My name is George Rouleau, and I just want to share my testimony with you and just to encourage you if you're ever having any doubts about God, Jesus, the Bible, or anything like that, or you found your life is just too hard and you can't make it anymore or whatever. So I was born in an alcoholic family. And when you're born in an alcoholic family, you're not given an identity. Nobody really cares. Everybody in my house, there was a lot of drinking, and no violence or anything like that, but a lot of drinking and carelessness. And that left us kids to do what we more or less wanted to do, and some things we got involved on we shouldn't have. But that was just part of life. And as I grew older, I used to be so interested in church and God. I used to go to church every Sunday. My folks never went to church. But I'd go to church just to look at the Stations of the Cross and this and that and the Eucharist and the altar and just wonder, what's that all about? And I even bought some of those statues from the 5 and 10 store we had then and glow in the darks. I used to, in my bedroom at night, look at those little statues, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. I just wondered what that was all about. I had a good feeling. It was a nice feeling to have, but I had no idea what it was all about. I didn't get anything more than that feeling that it was nice. So on and on it went. I became a teenager, and I belonged to a youth group in the local church I was going to, along with others. And the group leader asked me one time, he says, "Why don't you come and see me?" I said, "Okay." So I went to see him. He lived in a big city, and he used to come to our small town to do his Sunday school or whatever, teen group. And he lived in a hotel. So I went up to the hotel room. So I went in there, and the first thing I knew, he was showing pictures of naked women and things like that. And the first thing you know, he invited me to come and see him closer. And he put his hands on me where he shouldn't have. And that damages a person. Who doesn't have an identity. My father never said, "I love you." My mother, the only time she said she loved me is when she would say, not love me, but she'd say, "Oh, be a good boy and get your mother a beer." So I go get my mother a beer. And when I was in bed at night, sometimes she'd be kind of drinking, and she'd come into the room and she'd put her hand where she shouldn't have. If you've experienced something like this, you know how much. I'm 83 years old now. This happened way back when. But the pain, when I address it, I feel it. It has no power over me, but God has given me this gift of emotions that I can help you identify your emotions, or if you don't have an identity, to help you find your identity through the worst things that can happen in your life. And as I grew older, and my father drank and all that stuff still, and once it was a teen dance, and I wanted to go to the teen dance, but he always had a bottle of scotch. So I took some scotch in the 7-Up bottle and I put water in his bottle. And I went to dance and I got checked out because, of course, it was at the church hall and the pastor was there. You're out, buddy. So I got kicked out of that. And then when I went home, my dad said, you took some of my scotch. I know, because I know my scotch was watered down. He knew that. So he went out and he got himself, he took me in the car with him. So we're going to get a bottle of scotch. One for you, one for me. I was I don't know, maybe I was 13 or 14. First experience I have with my dad alone, imagine that. And so we go to the liquor store, he buys 2 bottles of scotch, come back home, and puts one in front of me and one in front of him. Okay, drink. Oh, gee, look at that, I'm drinking my own man. That's cool. So start drinking. Boy, it didn't take much for sure. So everything started to go and I got sick. And that's the worst thing he could have done. Because with that experience, it taught me, I got the feeling of I sort of an identity with the alcohol. Oh, so I'm a new person with alcohol. I can drink, I can be a different person. And that lasted for so long in my life. At home, we never celebrated anything. We celebrated everything. Drink if you're happy, drink if you're sad, drink if there's nothing to drink about. And I kind of followed in those footsteps. And that lasted for a while, quite a while. And as I got older, I started to realize that I didn't like my life anymore. I got married. While I was drinking, I went to a club and I met a woman, a bartender. She was there, a pretty young lady. And we got to know each other, and I was still drinking. And so I landed up marrying her, and she had a little daughter, 2 years old. And I had another identity. I'm a dad. Wow, I'm a dad. But I was still drinking. But this is just the way it was. And I landed up working in a foundry. And that was my identity there, because working in front of these big blast furnaces. Oh, as a macho man here, So, and then from that on, I went to work on trucks, driving a tractor trailer. That was my identity, driving a big truck and trailer. But I was still drinking too on the weekend. On the weekend, you see, when you're growing up in an alcoholic family, on the weekend, that's your reward. Your reward is you're allowed to get drunk. So I was drinking a case of 2-4 on Saturday, and then finish up with a case of 12 on Sunday, just to get myself ready to go back to work on Monday, so to speak. And I was in the police force, and I was driving a truck, and then I saw an advertisement that they wanted policemen in Montreal. So I applied, and I got hired. I got hired on as a police officer. That was pretty cool. I got an identity, badge, uniform, the whole thing. I had it made, but I was still drinking. And then one day, I went to work. I was a detective then, and I noticed my hands were shaking, trembling, and I thought, withdrawals, alcohol withdrawals. I'm shaking. That got me worried. I didn't like this feeling. And once we're at the station, and the sergeant said, who do you want to work with? Who's your buddy you'd like to partner with the most? So I wrote down a fellow's name, and that fellow wrote down my name. And he was a Christian. God is so tender. God knows us. God knows our weaknesses and our strengths. And I started talking about it. And I told him, I said, you have something that I want, that I need. And he started talking about Jesus. And he gave me a copy of the New Testament. It was called Good News for Modern Man. So I started reading that, and I shook my head and said, wait a minute, this story repeats itself. I read this and this one is similar. So I brought it back to him and I said, what's the book all about? He said, no, that's the Gospels. That's the testimony of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're telling that story about Jesus differently. So I go home and we had 3 children. Well, I had 4 children at that time, and it was not a happy marriage. It was definitely not a happy marriage. Not because of my drinking, it's just because, well, partner, I guess. But the drinking kind of kept me sedated, if you want, in the marriage to be able to survive. There was a lot of friction. But what happened? One day I was going to bed. I was drunk. I was going to bed. It was between New Year's and Christmas. I was 30 years old. 30 years old. I sat down on the edge of the bed, and I didn't bring my revolver home. I was a detective then. I didn't bring my revolver home. But in my mind, what I saw, I got up, I walked over to my dresser drawer, I opened it up, I took the gun, and I saw that white flash, if you want, what that one would experience if you shot yourself in the head, I guess. And all of a sudden, I lifted myself up. My closet door was open. I fell on my knees in the closet, in front of the closet door. And I just surrendered it all to Jesus. I cried like a baby. I cried like a baby. But man, and what I saw, some people think it's weird or whatever, was the shadow of a man in a cloak. It was in the closet, so it was dark. And I saw him put his hand like that. And I looked, and it was dark, but at the end, I saw the children playing, bright lights, sunshine. Wow, what a feeling. And then I heard him say, George, go to bed. I got up, I went to bed. The room didn't turn, didn't get sick. The next morning I awoke. Wow, a brand new life. It's as if the sun just shone so much brighter. The colors were more vivid. My heart was free. The bondage was broken. I was unshackled. I was free. And the peace and joy that I felt is not comparable with anything. I didn't say anything to anybody, to my wife or to my children. However, my children said, Dad. I said, yeah, another few days later, maybe a few more than a few days. Anyway, they said, Dad, it seems that you love us more. That really touched me. I never had an identity, but all of a sudden I had one. I was a child of God. And you can't beat that. Being a child of God gives you the protection, the love, the sincerity of heart, the alertness of mind and body that you would never experience. And this was totally opposite to the married life I was living before. And it just seemed that, well, at that time, my wife, she just got so angrier, because I wasn't being controlled anymore. If we got in a fight or something, I'd go and drink, And that was all right. Get George Maddox going to drink so I could do anything. So that was remarkable. And at the end of it, well, it was always money all the time. Need money. So I know I bought a house. I shouldn't have bought the house. And at one point in time, I was saved then. I went to the bank and asked to borrow the money to pay my mortgage. And the cashier said nicely, go bankrupt. And that was when the people could have bankruptcy. Before it was just for the companies. It said go bankrupt. And then when she said that, it's big weight lifted off my shoulders. So I went to the bankruptcy place. Yeah, they accepted me bankrupt. You pay so much for a year and you're free of all. I did that. And then she left me because of it. She said, no, I'm not moving. I'm not being a part of this. She had to leave the house. I couldn't keep the house. So I rented a place, enough for the whole family. But she said, it's done. Okay, God, it's your world, not mine anymore. And that was all right. A little while after that, I met another I met an elderly woman that she was going to the church I was going to at one point in time. And she had a daughter that came in from Montreal. And I said, did she like to meet her daughter? Okay, so she brought her to church. And she had twins, I think it was, yeah. And so we started to talk and this and that, and she's a Christian. I said, oh, no kidding. So we prayed together, read the Bible together and everything else, and that was a good life. And this little snapshot for the police force, I'd go to court and I'd see the mafia. They get a slap on the wrist for doing something they shouldn't have done. And the poor guy that stole the bicycle in the ghetto, you get whatever punishment, and overdone, just to show him a lesson, I guess. And I said, well, what could I do to help them not steal? And at that moment in time, a fella came down from in Burgundy, Little Burgundy, Montreal. He came down to where I was living with a couple that lived in that area. And I just looked at those people, and they were poor, they were not clean, overweight, underweight. One fellow had trouble speaking because he never went to school. And I fell in love with that. Well, I said, look at that. They need what I have now. They need Jesus, and they need to hear that. They need, the Lord said, that's for you. And I went to, it was called Tyndale St. George's in Little Burgundy. And I went there, and the young lady that was doing the mission work there, she was leaving. So I said, well, okay. So I went to see the two pastors. There was two pastors running, one of the Anglican church and the Presbyterian church. And I said, here, you looking for a pastor? They said, yes, okay, not a pastor, but a missionary. And I had taken a course at the Concordia on theology, and I talked with them. And they said, sure. So the woman that I did marry the second one that I met. She had little kids and that. I married her, and she supported me through the missionary work. She supported me there, and so I did that for about 3 years, missionary work in the ghetto, and then I recognized there was something different about it. She was undiagnosed bipolar. So it was a lot of ups and downs and confusion that I didn't realize at that time what it was. But then I learned it was bipolar, what she was experiencing. But anyway, then we moved up to Sault Ste. Marie. And I worked up there. She wanted to move to Sault Ste. Marie. I guess it's a part of the Owens. That's my hometown. So moved up to Sault Ste. Marie. And I worked for $5 an hour for, I think it was 2 years or so, just trying to make a living, supporting the family and that, And all of a sudden there was an opening at the hospital for their detox center. It was a place where those suffering from alcohol and drug abuse can go there, safe housing for up to 10 days or something. So I went there and applied for the job. And I went to see who was the manager of the program, and he was sitting at his desk with a Bible open. So, I said, "You're reading the Bible?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I'm a Christian." "Yeah." "Well, you got the job." See how God works. God gave me that job. He chose me. Now I knew what this life was all about, that was in turmoil, and slowly but surely how God carved out my path for His will in my life. So I got the job in Sault Ste. Marie, and she wasn't very happy living there. She moved back closer to home. So all of a sudden, they were looking up to opening up a detox center in Cornwall here. And I applied for the job. I came down to Cornwall for an interview, and they hired me. Wow. So I moved down here. And I think that was about the first year I was here. Then this woman, undiagnosed bipolar, she said, "Okay, you helped me raise my kids. It's finished. Now you can go. You're good. You're done." Wow. Okay. So that was another page to be to another chapter, if you want. Seasons in life. I learned to call that seasons in life. There's nothing that's a disaster in life. It's seasons in life. And when you experience life with Jesus, it's a big different life. You don't react to the same way you would have used to act. So yeah. So then I worked in there, and then I took courses. And I ended up teaching at the St. Lawrence College here in Cornwall. I managed the program at the Detox Center. I opened up and trained the people at the Detox Center. I landed up going to the health unit where I was with the lifestyle program, the addictions assessment program. And then I went to the Mount Carmel House Treatment Center. The executive director was leaving, so I applied. I got the job there, and after that, they were opening up a new addictions place. The center closed, the treatment center closed, and then they were opening up an addictions assessment program outside the health unit. So I applied for the job with all the experience I had. they called me the specialist in addictions or something like that. I said I have a foot in the door. So I went for the interview and that, and nope, no, you haven't got no job. You're out of a job. Man, that was tough. Unemployed again. Lord, what's going on? So I applied to be Santa Claus at the local mall, and I didn't get the job. That's how bad it was. I couldn't even be Santa Claus. However, God had a plan, and His plan was for me to be hired on at the addiction place that opened up that I was going to be applied to be director of as the intake person. Okay, Lord, from the top to the bottom, I can do that, bottom of the ladder, because it's His will. You see, and that's where the difference comes in. It was His will. So I went there and I did that. And being alone again, because the other woman didn't want to be with me anymore, I vowed never to get married again. I was finished. I told the Lord, I said, no, I'm finished. I'm just finished. No, I had no grudge against women or anything like that, but just with my hardship in life, I said, I'm done. And lo and behold, my sister called. Hey, George, why don't you come to Montreal to get a single parents dance? I said, no, I don't want to go. She said, yeah? She says, what are you doing? I said, I'm sitting in the rocking chair in my house, reading my Bible. Put that down and come on to the dance. And she was, okay, I'll just go to please her, So then off I go to the dance. And I had vowed I wasn't going to get involved with women anymore. However, the Lord again had His plans. And I went there, and that dance was a few nice little old ladies with the curly gray hair, They were so nice to me, That's why I danced with them. But then, excuse me, ladies with the curly hair, I didn't mean anybody. But anyway, I saw this young lady dancing, and I said to myself, now that's the energy I would like to have as a wife. I really would. I had vowed I wasn't going to get married, but this really appealed to me. And at one point in time, they had a dance called the Paul Jones dance. Women and men put a circle. The men on the outside and the woman in the inside circle, and you go around in different directions. When the music stops, you dance with the person in front of you. So guess who stopped in front of me? That young lady that I thought was so young, she stopped in front of me. So that was pretty interesting. And that evolved that, I came there, my sister drove me there with her car, and I told her, I said, no, I talked with this young lady, and she says, I told her, I said, I'd like to go to coffee sometime. She said, we're going for coffee tonight. Oh, I said, okay. So I went for coffee tonight. So I went to the restaurant, Tim Hortons, I think it was. And that's when it all started. And I knew when I first saw her at the dance, when I danced with her, something inside of me just knew that this was the girl selected for me by God, because she professed to be a Christian woman, and I was. So at the end of that dance, I wanted to dance with her. She says, come and see me at the last dance, I'll give you that. I said, okay. So the last dance, we danced. And I knew that this was the one. And it turned out to be so. So we went to coffee that night, and she took, and then we phone called, and telephone bills at that time, they didn't have a plan, so it was quite expensive. But anyway, 30 years later, married, and saying to myself, I just like I got married yesterday. the love that I have, that God has given me for her, and what she has for me surpasses anything that anyone could ever imagine. So I get emotional during these testimonies. Every time I give my testimony, I always tear up. But that's because of the love of God. See, if it wasn't if it wasn't for His love for me, I would have been lost. I would have been a street person someplace. Well, at one point in time, like I told my son, I said, one point in time it was rough. I said, you know what? I'm going to just get in my car, load it up with beer, and I'm going to go to the East Coast. I'm going to ditch my car, and then after that, I'm going to throw away all my identity, and I'm going to walk back west. No identity. Pretty insane thinking, but that's the way it is sometimes when the devil gets in your mind when you're at your lowest point. But that didn't happen. Anyway, so the way it turns out now, I'm blessed. I'm totally blessed. And if I've touched you in any way, shape, or form, if you're hurting, if you've been damaged through sexual abuse, physical abuse, any sort of abuse that tore you apart. I attempted suicide 3 times. Well, I thought of it. I didn't attempt it, but I thought of it, and I was going to carry it through. Well, once I got in my car during the bad times, and I just floored it, and I said, I'm not stopping for no red lights. My Lord. I just went, whoa. I was drunk then too. And then at one point in time, I came to a hill. There was a restaurant down at the bottom of the hill, and I skidded into the parking lot, and I was running head on to a Volkswagen with a lady getting in her Volkswagen with a fur coat. And I blacked out. And I woke up about 50 feet away with my tail end of my car in the ditch. I woke up. What? Then I looked around. No cop cars. The restaurant was closed. Put the car in gear, I climbed out of the ditch, parked on the side of the road in total amazement. And that was in my worst times. But that just goes to show you how the devil would do anything to stop you from where God wants you to be, at the end of the line where God wants you to be. You have a gift, you have a talent, you have a skill, you have an ability. Jesus is calling you now to use your gift, talent, skill, or ability to do something for Him. And if you truly believe that in your heart and confess yourself to Him, you see, surrendering to Him, surrendering to Jesus, surrendering all to Jesus will bring you more than you ever dreamed of. So I'm just going to leave that with you, thanking you for listening. And I do pray that you will call upon the name of Jesus and surrender to Him. And you'll have a new life, a new beginning. God bless you.